Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Naruto had Madara and Kurama sealed inside him? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Konoha, release your grip on this world. You are being held down and drowned by your own grasp. Why become the cause of your own downfall? Let your heart be empty. Let go of the false sense of reality. All that exists in this world is deceit and what you choose to believe to be true. So why would you acknowledge an incomplete world as reality? Clear your head. Let your soul go into space. Witness for yourself how your will has shaped and altered the environment around you. Why are you compelled to stay in this damaged dimension? Deplete your spirit. Turn ethereal. Toby gained insight. He could not see the world for what it really was, an illusion, until he had completely emptied himself. He had almost died after seeing Rin die, but everything had changed because of his Sharingan. At first, he didn't realize the significance, but Madara had made everything clear to him. It turns out that the Sharingan has a spirit of its own, and that when it is activated, it will adapt to its surroundings. To keep the wielder of the eyes, in this case Toby, safe, it will constantly change to match the threats in the outside world. However, the Sharingan will further evolve into the Mangekyo, altering the wielder's perception of the world and their ability to control it, when the danger is not only physical but also mental and emotional. Madara claims that there are both pure and evil ways to activate this power. Even though he didn't feel entirely pure after witnessing Rin's death, his Sharingan developed to improve his perception of reality. New powers also came along with this new vision. In an instant, he spiraled into existence at the Hokage's tower's main entrance. Madara had determined that he was prepared for this mission after he had trained for months using his newfound ocular abilities. Though there was only one chance to complete this mission in theory, Toby had no choice but to acknowledge that he was indeed prepared. Despite only being a teenager, he was ready to kill the Hokage and seize the Kyuubi. How odd that he was training under this Hokage as a weak genin only a few years ago. But Toba's strength had increased dramatically during those years of training under Madara with his newfound abilities, as well as a new Sharingan that Madara had assisted him in obtaining. Hell, considering Madara's advanced age and frail state, he believed himself to be the strongest ninja in the entire world at this point. If he so chose, he could rule the entire world, but for him, the world no longer held any significance. Rin. Taking a deep breath, he tried to suppress the feelings that uncontrollably swept over him, since this was his first visit to Konoha as a genin. He muttered to himself in a dark tone, "Let go of your hold to this world," as he carelessly adjusted the mask with one hole covering his face. When the guards at the end of the hallway noticed his appearance, they said, "Release the illusion of reality." So tonight they were ready for an attack. His scarlet eyes started to shine with strength. He kept saying to himself, "Free your spirit into the void," at which point the guards drew their kunai and started running in his direction. He snapped his own fingers, and a long katana materialized in his right hand in an instant, solidifying out of nothing. He concluded, "Become ethereal," as the guards moved in to cut at his face and heart with their kunai. The guards just phased through him like a ghost, slamming into the entry door behind him without a single movement on his part. He slashed back into this dimension and swept his katana in a wide arc, slicing through their necks before they could even turn around in shock at what had just happened. His blade sliced through their skin like ghosts, causing no damage, just as they had a moment before. The two guards, in contrast to him, fell to the ground, their bodies lifeless and their eyes glazed over. Toby saw a third guard standing where the first two had been when he turned his masked face forward. The man, who was likely twice his age, was trembling with a mixture of anger and fear, and he couldn't help but smile. How tempting it would be to take off this mask and show the world that he had come back, not as the worst student in his class, but an S-class monster instead. He launched himself forward, half-lashing into his other dimension. Such half-lashings would give the impression that his body was in this world, when in reality it was in another entirely. Now that he was partially in his own dimension, he could fly at amazing speeds in zero gravity. He arrived at the startled guard's location even before he could pull out a gun or make a hand signal. As before, Toby moved through the man as if he were a ghost, and he stopped right behind him. With the same swiftness, He spun around and stabbed his katana into the guard's chest, bringing himself back into the real world. The guard barely had time to say, "Wah," before he fell to the ground, lifeless. He drew his blade and it gleamed in the dim light, clean of blood. What a Jonin that guard was! He recollected how strong he once believed Jonin to be, and how everyone had been pleased with Kakashi upon achieving Jonin status. At the thought of his former teammate, he turned to partially lift his mask and spat. Betrayer. It would be his time. As before, Toby flew, but instead he half lashed back into his own dimension and chose to float forward, his cloak billowing behind him, giving the impression that he was a true phantom. After all, he needed to reach the Hokage's quarters, so he cautiously opened the door that led to the staircase above. As expected, higher up on the staircase were several more Konoha ninja. One of them radioed, hand to ear, face hidden behind a familiar mask, "He's here, in the front staircase." Anbu. At the sight of him, a flying phantom, these ninjas seemed emotionless, not even to shudder in fear. That was good. Even though they would undoubtedly die, perhaps this would be a more difficult encounter. One of the Anbu flew through some quick hand seals and landed on the tiger seal, instead of charging forward. He swiftly launched multiple lightning-fast fireballs in Toba's direction while raising his hands to his mouth. Toby snapped his fingers theatrically, and a tiny black hole appeared in front of him, drawing the fireballs into it. The fireballs disappeared, sucked into what seemed to be nothing more than a faint hiss. Toby could have easily let them pass right through him, but this was more interesting. Toby realized that two of the Anbu had materialized behind him during the brief diversion, instead of just standing there in shock. He was unharmed as two katana sliced through his chest before he could even turn around. When he heard them swear, he laughed. This was a really enjoyable experience. He whirled around and snapped his fingers again, making an additional tiny black hole appear in front of his eyehole. Before they could get away, reality itself started to twist and spiral around him. They were drawn into it. Both the hole and the two Anbu vanished soundlessly. He finally caught the glimpse of fear and hesitation he was looking for when he turned to face the remaining Anbu. When friends pass away and they realize they are only a few seconds away from dying, even some of the most skilled ninjas are sure to recoil. Toby said, "I'm here to bring about the creation of a new world," as he started to move toward the ninja and climb the stairs. "You cannot stop me." With a snap of his gloved fingers, he lashed out into nothingness, completely ethereal and undetectable to the human race. Flying forward, he approached the Anbu's glowing spirit, which remained motionless. After all, time traveled very differently in this dimension than it did in the real one. In his own dimension, he could travel great distances, and a mere minute could elapse before he resurfaced. He took his shining katana and drove it into the man's chest when he finally lashed himself back into the dimension of this world. Then the man's soul went out and he fell to the ground, dead, like a blown-out candle. After all, Toby had forged his katana in the emptiness. He could wield it like a real knife, and it seemed to cut through almost anything without any trouble at all, until it came into contact with a living thing, in which case it would sever a person's soul or life force. The workings of it were still beyond his grasp. He had attempted to attack people and creatures from a different dimension when he first discovered he could see their souls, or life energy, but he was unable to cause any harm. Even after using the unusual metals he discovered in his own dimension to forge his blade, nothing was harmed when he fully struck the emptiness. Strangely enough, the blade would only truly cut through anything if he was fully slashed into the real world. Anything that contained a chakra or life force would be totally destroyed by the blade from the spiritual plane. About 24 ninja lay dead in his wake by the time he made it to the hallway that led to the Hokage's office. The final two were trembling with anger and fear as they stood guard by the Hokage's office. They were Chunin. It was odd that two Chunin would remain by the door after killing several Jonin and Anbu. Toby gave the order, "Move aside," and approached them carefree. "I quickly tire of killing you. There's nothing you can do to stop me." Unexpectedly, one of them leapt to the right, dropping their kunai. "Really?" He twisted his head and narrowed his focus to the moving target, setting Kamui off and sending the man hurtling into another, empty dimension. He winked at the terrified guard when he turned back to face him, though the man's mask would hide his true feelings. Toby casually said, "What a dick," to the other guard, who appeared to be ready to run for it. "I mean, you guys have one job, don't you? To guard the Hokage? Shouldn't someone with that job not run away when the Hokage is about to be attacked? Toby shook his head and snapped his fingers once more, bringing the previous deserter ninja to life in front of him, gaunt and bewildered. He was instantly killed by Toby as he casually slipped his katana through him before he could say anything. Disregarding the lone guard, he swung back into the empty space, the surroundings turning grayscale representations of reality around him. He moved past the guard's glowing life force with gentleness until he reached the Hokage's office, at which point he swung back into reality. Toby mumbled, empty of heart, mind, and soul, as he entered the office. I stand before you, ethereal, divine. I've come for. That night, Toby was the one caught off guard for the first time. He thought the Hokage would be sitting behind the desk, but he was not there. Rather, an older man with dark hair and a menacing sparkle in his eyes was present. Oh no, maybe he had been overly optimistic about the Hokage's presence here all along. Who are you? The man ordered, maintaining his composed demeanor while seated behind his desk, as though he was unaware of the danger he was in at the moment. What was the name of this man? Danzo. Though Toby didn't know much about him, Danzo probably knew where his former sensei Minato was if he was sitting here in the Hokage's office. And Minato was undoubtedly guarding the nine-tailed fox and his wife if he wasn't present. Toby chose not to speak as he stepped forward cautiously and half lashed out of this dimension. In a matter of steps, Kunai emerged from the shadows and carelessly passed through him. There was nothing these ninjas could do to hurt him, and he felt like a god. He was unbeatable. Naturally, he could see Danzo becoming anxious as he got closer. Toby said, I am no one. His own words burning harshly on his tongue. But so are we all. This world will soon be nothing. So tell me, Danzo, where is the Hokage and his wife? Instead of waiting for a reply, Toby called forth a powerful amount of chakra and directed it toward his right eye. His red Sharingan started to coil and twist into the Mangekyu, a new, intricate form. Koto Amatsukami. He felt the blood from his eye start to run down his face as he quickly combed Danzo's brain for the information he needed. Koto Amatsukami, a sister technique of Tsukuyomi, was a Mangekyu technique that permitted one to fully enter and control a person's mind. But Toby was not proficient with it yet, and he probably never would be. The technique only allowed him to use it once a day and required a great deal of chakra to even use, so he was unable to subtly manipulate people as Madara had once been able to. Typically, one can only unlock the Mangekyu Sharingan using 2 native special techniques. The remaining ones are much more difficult to learn and even more difficult to master. Though Toby had intended to save this jutsu for the Hokage, he realized that saving his chakra would be useless if he couldn't locate the Hokage in the first place. He found what he was looking for and left Danzo's mind after a moment in the real world. The evil things he had witnessed in such a short period of time made him laugh aloud. So he's over in a cave outside the village, is he? He asked, observing the startled-up eyebrows on Danzo. I'll be heading over there, then. But I don't have to worry about you intervening, do I? After all, this whole defense is a ruse. You wish to become the Hokage yourself. Danzo's eyes narrowed, filled with a deep sense of fear and hate. Who are you? He yelled, hitting the table with his fist. Toby laughed once more and shook his head. First the Senju, next the Uchiha, then the Hyuga? You wish to take power for yourself and remove it from everyone around you. You may ultimately aim for peace, but you're so short-sighted in your plans, so naive for someone your age. After obtaining all the information he required, he turned his back on the dishonest old man. Know this, Danzo. I am the will of Madara Uchiha. And against his will, Konoha will burn to ashes. He disappeared with a snap of his finger. Konoha, miles away. The timing of Toba's arrival was perfect. The moment when the parents held their child alone for the first time was cut short as he entered the room with the guards outside dead. Thus, the seal containing the 9 tails was about to be undone as the red-headed Jinchuriki gave birth. The thought of anyone sealing a tailed beast into a woman was infuriating. The risk of them becoming pregnant and unintentionally releasing a demon onto the world was just too great. Not that he was whining, after all. He was making the most of this circumstance for himself. Not that he wasted time on long monologues or getting rid of all the medics he sensed in the rooms around them. When Kushina was getting ready to give birth, he had planned to fight his old sensei, the 4th Hokage, But now that the deed was complete, there was no reason for him to bother interacting with the new parents. The 9 tails were all that he required. "Congratulations," he exclaimed, finally making his presence known after they had still failed to see him. The 4th Hokage and Kushina Uzumaki turned from their child to stare at him in a moment of terror and confusion. Grinning broadly, he turned to face Kushina while his red Sharingan whirled erratically. Their error. The next instant, he materialized inside what appeared to be a convoluted sewer system after using his visual jutsu to enter Kushina's subconscious. He turned to see the enormous, imposing metal gates of the Kyuubi ripped open. Madara had told him that typically the gates would have a tiny paper seal on them, one that only the Jinchuriki were allowed to touch. But that seal would weaken enough during childbirth that the Kyuubi would be able to pass through it, unleashed first inside Kushina's subconscious and then outside of it completely. If that was true, then where was the tailed beast at this point? As he passed through the gates, he started to hear what sounded like a massive breathing sound, something that could only have come from a monster the size of the fabled 9 tails. A loud snarling sound that sounded almost painful started to come from whatever was sensing his presence. His eyes briefly widened with shock behind his mask as he saw massive chains swirling with powerful chakra protruding from the ground and encircling none other than Lord Kyuubi, the 9-tailed fox, as soon as he walked far enough that the light somehow shifted and he was able to see the creature. "Who are you and what do you want with the 9 tails?" His eyes lowered to meet the far-off humanoid silhouette that had called out to him. As he got closer, he could see that it was Kushina Uzumaki, who was perspiring from effort and focus, with her hands clasped in the snake seal. Yes, then she was the one who had called for the chains. Toby forced himself to say, "Very impressive," as he turned to face the enormous beast in her wake, going through childbirth while simultaneously suppressing the Kyuubi. "You haven't had that fun of a night, have you?" Kushina appeared unflattered. "Who the hell are you?" she exclaimed, shaking her head angrily and exhaustedly, perspiration streaming down her face. Toby answered, "Unfortunately, I'm here to make your night worse, obligingly." He reached up to his face, gently peeled off the mask that covered him, with one hand. What he was about to do would require the use of both of his eyes. To put it mildly, Kushina had a rather comical expression on his face. "Obito, Uchiha? Is that really you, Obito?" The Kyuubi, hearing his last name, may have sensed something was about to happen because he momentarily stopped struggling. It truly found it difficult to raise its massive head and give him a look, and when it saw the strength in his red eyes, its eyes widened. "Those eyes, Kushina, you pitiful brat, stop him." It was too late. Even though he was flattered that the Kyuubi considered him a threat, he used all the chakra he could muster to open his eyes and unleash the Mangekyo Sharingan to execute his signature move once more. He yelled, "Enter the void!" with blood streaming from both of his eyes and a voice strained from the intense effort. Kamui. Directly above the Kyuubi, high in the air, materialized a black hole the size of his head. In a matter of seconds, the restrained demon fox was drawn upward into the chasm and sucked away before Kushina could intervene. Toby was so tired he almost went limp. It was him. He had imprisoned a beast with tails inside his own dimension. At least now Toby was strong enough to be able to temporarily seal them away, but his overall visual jutsu and spiritual chakra weren't nearly as potent as Madara's. Madara's Sharingan was strong enough to use Koto Amatsukami to control any tailed beast. He opened his eyes to find himself back in the safe house, staring at Kushina and the 4th Hokage, his Sharingan having returned to normal. When the infant started to cry, it appeared as though the 4th Hokage was going to speak or strike, but Kushina sprang forward and took hold of his arms. She held their newborn and continued to breathe heavily, pleading, "Minato, watch out. He just entered my mind. He stole the Kyuubi from me. It's Obito Uchiha, your old student." The 4th gave him an incredulous look. He shook his head, saying, "Stole the Kyuubi? Obito? There's no way. I don't believe it. Obito died years ago." Toba's mission was done. He had sealed away the Kyuubi. All he had to do was go back to Madara and slash. The 4th Hokage materialized in front of him in an instant and used a kunai to slash at his face. Toby had to lean back to prevent his eyes from being cut out due to the extremely fast speed. Although the blade was able to pierce his mask, Toby was fortunately spared any injuries. He made sure to half lash himself into the void before the 4th could follow up. It took him a few seconds to regenerate chakra, not quite enough to warp all the way back to Madara's hideout just yet. "It is you, Obito," with a mixture of perplexity, sympathy, and rage. The fourth Hokage observed him as his mask collapsed to the ground. Revolting. Right now, the last thing he needed was for this man, a remnant of his former existence, to start lecturing him or pleading with him to come back. Oh no, the fourth had most likely deliberately withheld information to reveal his identity and demolish his mask. In a flash, he wondered if Kushina had not mentioned his name, and the fourth had killed him instead. Curse them all. "That's not my name anymore," Toby said with a bitter smile, attempting to buy himself the few extra seconds he needed to completely deform. "Minato-sensei, it's been a while, hasn't it? Sorry I can't stay and talk." A pathetic tear trickled down his old mentor's cheek. "Obito, I'm so glad, I haven't lost two of my students." The mention of Rin's passing and his name again made him feel angry. This bastard took a deep breath and tried his hardest not to show his feelings. Not now, nor here. Now that he had a new mission, his fury and anger were in the past. A fresh coach. A more powerful mentor and a more powerful goal. He had emptied his mind, his soul, and his heart, and he was no longer Obito. "Smell you later, old man. And good luck tonight, you'll need it." Toby released a burst of chakra and started to fade away, unable to hear his old sensei's last words. Somewhere else Toby dropped to his knees and took a deep breath as he lashed back into the world. In search of support, his hands extended toward the chilly stone floor beneath him. He was so tired, yet he couldn't stop the crazy smile that took over his mutilated face. It was him. He had not let Madara down. "You've returned." Toby looked up into this far-off, God-forsaken cave and saw Madara Uchiha sitting on a stone chair. He tried to catch his breath. "Master," he said in a humble manner, skipping Madara's obvious question. "I have succeeded in capturing the Nine Tails. I hold him prisoner within the void as we speak." As silly as it sounds, Toby had hoped Madara would smile or laugh and tell him how successful he was. Rather, the elderly man merely nodded. "Good. I expected nothing less from my greatest student." This was better than a smile, for sure. People had always denigrated him and considered him to be a failure. Until he met Madara Uchiha, no one had ever expected great things from him. Madara had given him the best training possible and had put all of his hopes and dreams in him. Indeed, Madara Uchiha had put his trust in a failure just like him. And now Madara wasn't even shocked at his success when he was assigned to face the nine-tailed fox and the fourth Hokage. That was the extent of Madara's faith in him. This was a man he would die for, and it warmed and gave him hope in his heart. This was a man who would support him in realizing his dreams because he believed in him. "And your mask?" Madara asked, observing that he had come back naked. "Has the Leaf Village discovered your identity?" Toby bowed his head, embarrassed. "Master, I have failed to kill the fourth Hokage. I was simply too exhausted after sealing the Kyuubi within the void. After I left Kushina's subconscious, the fourth attacked me and destroyed my mask. Only he and Kushina saw my face. Master, I'm so sorry." With a quick shake of his head, Madara waved away his apology. It seemed like a huge effort for him to get off his throne. "Rise, my apprentice," he said as he approached him cautiously. "You have not failed me. Killing the fourth Hokage was never an important matter in the first place. Your mission was a success. You have done the Uchiha proud, my boy." Toby nodded, fighting the impulse to dry the tear of relief and thanks that had found its way out of one eye. If left unattended, it blended in with the blood still smeared across his face. Madara wasn't entirely let down by him. His sensei, the old man, approached him gradually and eventually stood in front of him. Madara had white hair that reached almost to the floor. This man was elderly and on the verge of death, so Toba's success in this mission was crucial. Ultimately, Madara didn't have much time left. Placing his withered hand gently on Toba's shoulder, Madara asked, "Do you have enough chakra left to cast me into the void? I wish to confront the Kyuubi now, while I still have the energy. I want you to wait 5 minutes once I'm inside, and then cast me back." Toby got up and gave an enthusiastic nod. That was it. They had been preparing for this moment for years. With the majority of his remaining energy, he formed the Mangekyo once more and directed his visual jutsu towards his sensei by pushing his chakra into his eyes. Good luck, Sensei. Kamui. Similar to the Kyuubi, a tiny, dark ball that was no bigger than Madara's fist materialized above him. Madara's image wavered for a few seconds before he was drawn into the same emptiness that Tobi had trapped the Kyuubi in. Just as his sensei vanished, Tobi collapsed to the ground once more, exhausted. The blood still trickled from his eyes, and he moaned and gripped at them. He had only been training with the Mangekyo for a little over a year, but even so, the pain was unbearable and had taken a toll on him. Even with a new Sharingan inserted into the opposite side of his face, he could hardly see 10 feet ahead of him at this point. It was astounding how fast these cursed eyes were destroying his vision. It seemed as though he had been endowed with divine abilities, but he was only able to utilize them for a year before losing his sight. He didn't have a brother whose eyes he could steal in order to obtain the eternal Mangekyo, unlike Madara-sensei. Tobi would be dependent on the Sharingan storage that Madara had accumulated over time. After 5 minutes, Tobi had enough chakra left to call his sensei back. As he gathered his chakra again, he felt uneasy. It was as though fate herself was observing him. He currently had the 9-tailed fox and Madara Uchiha imprisoned in an alternate dimension for all time. They would never be able to get out. Madara himself had never mastered the technique of Toba's Mangekyo unlocking Kamui first. Tobi was able to leave this dimension and enter others thanks to his profound manipulation of time and space with his Mangekyo. If he didn't act now, Madara Uchiha and the tailed beast would be imprisoned forever. However, if he called upon his sensei, the world's destiny would be irreversibly altered. Making the decision was simple. He no longer owned this world. He didn't want to be a part of a world where Rin wasn't. Madara would make that different. Madara would bring about a complete transformation. Kamui. As he directed his thoughts and called forth Madara, another black sphere materialized in front of him. And sure enough, a man landed in front of him after falling out of the sphere. Tobi was momentarily concerned that something had gone horribly wrong with this man when he looked up at him. His jet black hair stretched almost to the floor. The man wearing the same red, antiquated Uchiha armor as Madara appeared to be no more than 30 years old. He was clear-headed as soon as his eyes met the man's face. Madara Uchiha was this man, but how had he gotten so young? Ha ha ha. What's the deal, Tobi? Madara asked him in a light-hearted tone that was almost identical to his previous one but less somber. It's still me. I've tamed the 9 tails, and absorbed enough of its energy and life force that my own has been returned. I stand before you, Madara Uchiha, at last. Tobi went to his knees once more, voluntarily this time. He bowed before his sensei, who had come back to life, and whose Sharingan was so strong that it was able to subdue even the 9 tails. He bowed himself respectfully and said, Master, practically giddy with anticipation. Now that he understood, he no longer wondered how Madara would attack and destroy the Leaf Village as he had claimed. He was happy that he had trusted Madara completely and placed all of his trust in him. Who was he to question, in the first place, the methods of someone like Madara? Because just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so too are Madara's thoughts and ways higher than his own. Madara calmly said, Do not kneel before me any longer, my pupil, in a deep, emotive voice. At this point, you are no longer my student. You are my peer, my partner in trying to right the wrongs of this world. I will never forget your contributions to my plan, Tobi. When I remake the world, I will ensure you and your love are a part of it as we originally agreed upon. I will never go back on my word, after all. This time, he let his tears fall freely from his face. Tobi was ecstatic to see that his sensei was still keeping his word and his promise. Madara was going to create a new world, one that would include Rin, be free of conflict, and see Toba's rebirth. Tobi said, Good luck, Madara, understanding what she was up to. I'm sure the hidden village of the Leaf will fall before your renewed might in the 9 tails. I wish I could join you, but my chakra. Madara gave him a genuine smile and put a loving hand on his head. He said, Don't worry, Tobi, with a sincere smile on his face. I'll come back for you when I've finished destroying the corruption of the Leaf Village. And when I do, we will start the next phase of our plan. We will capture the remaining tailed beasts and execute the Moon's Eye plan. Your work, your pain, and your servitude will pay off, my friend. A friend? Did Madara really think this of him now? Both as a peer and a friend? Toby did the only thing he could to contain his tears and avoid embarrassing himself in front of his sensei. After removing his hand from his shoulder, Madara started to move in the direction of their hiding place's exit. He turned to face TPNO before heading out into the night, and the fabled eternal Mangekyo appeared in his eyes. "Toby," he said, his previous smile still clinging to his face. "You and I will end the war that plagues this world. We will achieve true peace. We will eradicate evil once and for all. I will become the god of our new world, and I will reward you for your great service." That was when Madara vanished from sight and fate started to work, bringing about a radical shift in the ninja community. The third Hokage, Konoha, he had sincerely hoped that during his lifetime he would never again need to put on this armor. Exhausted, Hiruzen Sarutobi completed fastening the final gauntlet to his wrist just in time to see a ninja walk into his office. "Lord Third," the ninja exclaimed, hunching over and laboring to breathe. "The nine-tailed fox has appeared within the village. It's destroying everything, and the fourth Hokage is nowhere to be seen." Hiruzen gave a solemn nod. Even before the first explosion occurred, he had felt the evil presence in the village and knew that a horrible event was on the horizon. For the first time, he looked up at the messenger ninja, finally fastening his headband. "I understand. Tell the head ninja to rally the Jonin and Anbu and begin attacking the Kyuubi. The Chunin and Genin are to begin evacuating and protecting the civilians at once. I will head straight to battle. Go at once." The ninja gave him a quick salute and drove off. "Yes, sir." Hiruzen sighed as he dashed forward, leaping from his office window onto a neighboring roof, and scanning the area for a better look at the village. He didn't even need to see the Kyuubi to start moving in its direction because the chakra's pure evil presence was so potent that any ninja could locate its source even if they closed their eyes. The Kyuubi actually turned its head toward him as soon as he got close to the enormous beast, as if it sensed his presence. What could possibly be even worse? Oh my god? Was there someone perched atop the Kyuubi's head? Summoning Jutsu. "Come forth, great monkey king Enma." Hiruzen, not one to take any chances, bit his thumb and called forth Enma, his greatest ally and weapon. Enma's eyes grew wide as he saw the enormous demon destroying the village in front of them, emerging through a tiny cloud of smoke. Looking back at Hiruzen, he exclaimed, "Good lord, it's the Nine Tails. What is the hell is going on, Sarutobi?" Hiruzen pointed back to the enormous fox and said, "The Kyuubi has appeared within the village, and it looks like there is someone who summoned it. Look. There, on top of the beast's head, you can see someone standing." Indeed, upon closer inspection, Enma saw the humanoid form of a person perched atop the fox, destroying everything in its path. Many of the shinobi who happened to be nearby attempted to leap and attack the enormous beast. If they managed to avoid the Kyuubi's warning, the person on top would use amazing fire jutsu to burn them all. What a fierce chakra! Hiruzen and Enma could sense the man's chakra, which was even more evil than the Kyuubi's, even from this distance, where the entire village was engulfed in an evil aura due to the full force of the Kyuubi. Hiruzen yelled to his friend, "Let's not waste any time, Enma. Transform and help me push the fox out of village." "Right. Here I go, Sarutobi." Enma changed into the renowned black diamond staff in a second burst of smoke, flying straight toward Hiruzen, who grabbed it and whirled it to face the Nine Tails. He yelled, "Here we go," as he pressed his chakra into the staff. The staff instantly grew outward at an amazing speed, shooting hundreds of yards in a split second while growing along the way. The end of the staff was bigger than a house by the time it got to the Kyuubi. With such force that it actually forced the beast back, it flew backward and beyond the boundaries of the village as it crashed into it. The shinobi who had come to witness this amazing feat let out a loud cheer. A few moments afterward, Hiruzen was landed beside Shikaku, the head ninja of the fourth Hokage. Ninja from Anbu and Jonin raced toward the Kyuubi all around them, reaching it just in time. We ran up to Shikaku and he called out to him, "Lord Third, I've briefed the high-level ninja. They're to keep fighting the Kyuubi and keep it out of the village now, but the fourth Hokage is nowhere to be found." "Minato. Where are you?" Damn it all. He was aware that the seal on the Kyuubi was weak and that Minato was meant to be watching over Kushina during her birth. The Kyuubi had been called here, so it was clear that Minato had failed in his attempt to keep Kushina safe and the Nine Tails contained. Could it be that the man perched atop the Kyuubi was now the one who had taken the 9 tails and let it run loose in the village? Had he also slain the 4th Hokage? Who could accomplish such a thing? Hiruzen surged forward, breaching the village wall to go after the Kyuubi, following the lead of the ninja surrounding him. Hiruzen would find out for sure who this man was who had called the Kyuubi and put an end to this whole thing. After slamming Enma into the ground, Hiruzen fired chakra into the staff once more. This time, he leapt quickly into the air, surpassing even the Kyuubi. When he reached a sufficient height, he shrank his staff to its original size and started to move down, toward the Kyuubi's head. If things went south, he could always use the Reaper Death Seal, an illegal sealing method, to break the 9-tailed skull. From this vantage point, he might be able to use the staff to do just that. The man who had called for the fox materialized beneath him before he could approach it, extending his sword in an attempt to impale Hiruzen. Hiruzen blocked the blade and spun Enma around just in time, but they were now stuck in midair. When he was able to get a close-up look at Konoha's attacker's face, his eyes grew very large. This was none other than Madara Uchiha. Impossible. Knowing that staring into Madara's Sharingan would mean certain death, Hiruzen quickly averted his gaze from them. Using his surprise as an advantage, Madara spun around and kicked Hiruzen out of the way, breaking multiple ribs with the force of the blow and sending him flying to the side. "Ah!" Hiruzen exclaimed in agony as a Konoha ninja stopped him in his tracks, stopping him before he could hit the tree canopy. Madara Uchiha is the person. He didn't know how, but Madara managed to bring the Kyuubi to life and launch an assault on the village. And to make matters worse, the Konoha ninja's attacks on the demon were having no effect whatsoever. It advanced gradually, drawing nearer to the village walls once more. There was nothing else he could do. He had to seal the 9 tails inside of himself with the Reaper Death Seal before they could reach. Summoning Jutsu. A huge cloud of smoke erupted right above the wall before the Kyuubi could climb it, and the 4th Hokage's giant toad summon, Gamabunta, dropped out of the sky and landed squarely on top of the 9 tails. Perched atop Gamabunta, the 4th Hokage stood. Thankfully, he wasn't dead after all. But as swiftly as their savior materialized, the 4th and the 9 tails vanished in an enormous burst of yellow light. That was Jutsu, the god of flying thunder, Hiraishin. A few of the nearby ninja gave an early round of applause, believing the beast to have been defeated. Where in the world had the 4th taken them? Hiruzen knew better. Hiruzen and the other shinobi turned in surprise when a massive explosion occurred miles away from the village, just a few seconds after the 9 tails and the 4th disappeared. "Over there," exclaimed Hiruzen, leaping once more in close proximity to the head ninja. "Shikaku, assemble a squad of the best Anbu who are prepared to give up everything to follow me after the 4th Hokage. I think I know what he's planning to do, and I must stop him. Everyone else is to protect the village in case we fail." Later it was already too late when they got to the scene. There was a barrier of sorts that the 4th Hokage had put up to keep everything from leaving or entering. Not even Jiraiya could master sealing jutsu of this level on his own. Only the 4th could. Hiruzen dashed around the outside of the chakra barrier with the Anbu that had caught up to him, and then they were able to peer through a clearing to see what was happening inside. It was none other than Kushina Uzumaki who had the Kyuubi bound in chains. Minato Namikaze stood to her right, raising his hands to create several seals. When Minato finally finished, Hiruzen found himself saying out loud, "Those hand signs," which confirmed his suspicions. The 4th intends to enclose the beast inside of him and sacrifice himself for the benefit of the village. Beneath the bladed chains that held him in place, the Kyuubi let out a sudden roar, and chakra started to clearly separate from him and fly toward Minato. The 9 tails really started to physically diminish in size in a matter of seconds, and eventually Minato collapsed from sheer exhaustion. "What? I don't understand," Hiruzen uttered as he and the other Anbu looked forward. He should have sealed the demon away with that technique. Did he not have enough? One of the Anbu interrupted, pointing past Minato and saying, "Lord Third, look at the center, in front of 4th Hokage. It's a child." As it turned out, Hiruzen could just barely make out the details of a baby crying out in terror while lying inside a peculiar kind of ritualistic shrine in front of both Kushina and Minato. From this vantage point, it was easy for him to see the boy's brilliant blonde hair, which matched the 4th's color. My goodness, that was his newborn son. he intended to seal the remaining Kyuubi inside his own son. Hiruzen yelled, "Minato, you fool," over the roaring Kyuubi, hoping against hope that the fourth would turn around and hear him. "Don't do this. Let me take the place of the child. Seal the Kyuubi within me instead." Minato either didn't hear him or didn't care, because she moved forward to the altar and made more intricate seals. "Please don't, Minato. Not in your own territory." Death Reaper seal. Later Hiruzen approached the altar, tears welling up in his eyes, and peered down at the child who was still wailing in terror. Minato had decided on the name Naruto for him. As Hiruzen surveyed the battlefield, he noticed that Kushina and Minato were dead and that there were burn marks everywhere. But where was Madara Uchiha? Had that man, in some way, gotten away? How did he come to be alive at all, and why did he? Hiruzen noticed that the baby Naruto had stopped crying, and his thoughts froze. He strolled over to the shrine and, kneeling beside him, ran a finger over the seal's immense intricacies, admiring the seal that now graced the infant's stomach. "That's odd. The seal itself doesn't appear to be how Jiraiya described it should. Had Minato gotten it wrong?" He froze when he sensed the baby was emanating a strong chakra that was even more sinister than the Kyuubi's own. As he slowly raised his head to meet Naruto's eyes, his heart almost stopped. They had 3 tomatoes in each iris and shone a vivid crimson red. Without question, this was the Sharingan. But the baby blinked and his eyes went back to a clear blue, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The terrible realization that something stronger than the Kyuubi had just been sealed away inside the boy's stomach struck the third Hokage as he slowly and terrifiedly peered down to the seal on Naruto's stomach. Madara Uchiha. Konoha Orphanage, 4 years later. Lunchtime. The orphanage kids erupted in cheers as they hurried from the play area to the cafeteria. It made sense that they would be so content because lunch was one of their favorite times of the day, and afterward, they would all go outside and play. With the exception of one child who stayed waiting in the back of the room, everyone was beaming as they filed out. After spending many years in this hellhole, Naruto Uzumaki's happiness had somewhat changed from when he was born. For as long as he could remember, the adults had treated him like garbage, and worse than that, they had raised and taught the other kids to treat him the same way. It was as though it hurt everyone else to see him happy, because his laughs and smiles would be laughed at and disregarded. To be honest, he had no idea why he was treated so poorly by everyone. To the best of his memory, he had done nothing to merit this treatment. However, he would always wind up getting pushed, injured, and so forth, accidentally. When he wasn't looking, an adult, accidentally, spilled hot coffee on him earlier this morning, causing him to sob in agony as everyone laughed at him. Even though he made a concerted effort to suppress his tears, there were moments when the anguish and sorrow became unbearable for him. Not only did he lack parents, but the orphanage appeared to despise him as well. But in spite of everything, he made a concerted effort to always have a smile on his face and an optimistic outlook. Most of the time, it was all he could do, and it demonstrated to everyone else that he would always make an effort to be happy, regardless of what they did to him. Naruto strapped his small bag onto his back before leaving the playroom far behind everyone else, watching with caution to his left and right. His meager possessions were all stored in a bag he had discovered outside one day, forgotten and abandoned. He had decided to keep everything he owned with him so no one else could tamper with it after a few incidents where his toothbrush had accidentally fallen into the toilet or his small plush doll fox had been thrown away. He was lucky to save it in time. Despite being only 4 years old, his mistreatment had taught him valuable lessons, if not street smarts, the hard way. He had been trying to accomplish everything by himself for the past few months because he knew that doing things on his own would put him in a safer situation. Peering out the hallway, he silently made his way to the lunchroom where he picked up his own tray. He'd seen too many times to expect the lunch lady to serve him, only to be met with an empty tray and a scowl while the other kids got their food served to them. He had previously heard the lunch lady ask him, "Why would I serve you food?" Naruto was clueless. She served everyone else but him, so why not him? Getting his own food wasn't that difficult, so it didn't really matter. He saw there was some leftover chicken from the main pot and was about to go get his usual humble pie. He was about to take the spoon and place some on his plate, grinning to himself, when smack. When Naruto pulled back his now red hand, the lunch lady materialized behind him and gave it a forceful smack with her big spoon. "That's not for you, Fox," she growled, as though he'd attempted to pilfer something. Naruto said, "G Gomen," and hurried around the woman to the other side of the counter, where he picked up some unappealing soggy and mushy rice that was touted as healthy. With a sigh, he moved his tray to a low, long table by himself and ate in silence. He had attempted to request more food once, but was met with a slap on the face, even though the food was never really enough to satisfy him. This would have to do for now. He got up and went to put his dirty tray away, but as he was walking, someone tripped over his foot, sending him flying forward and landing hard on his face, dropping the tray. Naruto attempted to join in on the laughter in the room, laughing at himself as he attempted to put the tray away and leave before breaking down in front of everyone. Later that day, Naruto patiently waited for the day to end as he sat outside in the orphanage yard beneath a shade tree with his bag by his side. As usual, the other kids laughed at him when he attempted to join in their game of soccer and told him to go play somewhere else. Naruto decided to pass the time by teaching himself things that the teachers would not, since this was a common occurrence. The orphanage housed a wide range of age groups, and the teachers there started teaching the slightly older kids how to read and write, and the even older ones, how to train to be ninjas. Naruto tried teaching himself to read one day by sneaking out a scroll, knowing that he would never be permitted to play with the ninja toys. Naruto would spend hours learning to read because he realized there was no other option, whereas other kids would only receive instruction in reading for roughly 30 minutes a day. Sincerely, he didn't understand much of it, but he knew that one day he would be able to learn for himself, and maybe then the adults would respect him more. It seemed that Naruto was actually making some headway in his reading comprehension. He thought his eyes were pretty good because he was always able to see things with them that other kids were not able to. To his surprise, after observing them for some time, his eyes also began to recognize symbols and their sounds. Naruto let out another sigh, took out one of the borrowed scrolls, and started tutoring himself, crossing his fingers. Though incredibly dull, the benefit of knowledge would make it worthwhile. Evening of the following day outside, Naruto ate dinner by himself while leaning against his Godu tree and keeping his backpack close at hand. Though it was still between the large walls surrounding the orphanage, this was his favorite spot because it was far enough away from the orphanage that no one played around him and he was left alone in peace and quiet. As far as he could tell, Konoha was a really lovely village, and the weather was pleasant, though he had only ever been outside the orphanage walls when he had to be brought back after waking up in the hospital. He was confident that the rest of Konoha was equally beautiful. But at least then, on his wonderful walk back, he got to see the village. He removed the food he had brought out and picked up his chopsticks. He started to pick up small pieces of rice from his small plate, looking down at it as if eating more would satisfy his hunger. For him, everything had gone according to plan today. Even though he would sometimes be made fun of, he would put up with it, study by himself, get some exercise, and then go to bed. Even though he found every day to be boring, he persevered in the hopes that it would eventually get more interesting. Once the orphanage kids turned 8 years old, they were free to go to the academy, or whatever it was called, which Naruto assumed was a place where they taught ninja skills. Naruto became aware that he would become a ninja when he turned 8 after hearing what a ninja was and how they went about and outside of the village, performing dangerous missions. But he was aware that the orphanage would not accept him unless he could read and could train himself, something he made a self-promise to do. He would go to any lengths to become a ninja, escape this orphanage, and gain the respect of everyone, no matter how monotonous it was. Hey! In preparation for being insulted or having some mud thrown at him, Naruto's head snapped up in defense. He sincerely hoped that no one would discover the location of his secret hangout because he didn't want any kids to show up and tease him. To his utter surprise, though, he was confronted by a little child of the same age, with long, dark brown hair and a lovely dress, standing over him without the ill intent that so many other faces in the area displayed. She actually kind of looked like she was staring down at a battered puppy, wondering if it would finally give up on her. Furthermore, this was that girl, the one who was regarded as a princess by all. She wants to talk to him, but why? Peering down at him curiously, she asked, "Are you going to say something, or stare at me all day? I know you're smart enough to know how to talk, I think." With a shrug, Naruto returned to his scroll in the hopes of avoiding trouble. He had been in a world of hurt the last time he had attempted to talk to this girl. The supervisor said that he should never speak to someone as valuable as her, no matter how lowly. She frowned and crossed her arms, saying matter-of-factly, "Well, you're not very interesting." Naruto gave her a look of genuine annoyance as he looked up at her. He truly didn't need this pampered girl to come over to his place and ruin it anymore. He'd had enough jeers for one day. Nevertheless, he forced a fake smile and turned to face her again, hoping that she would go away. His statement, "I'm sorry that I don't know any tricks," raised her eyebrows. "And you should probably go now, or everyone will think I gave you rabies or something." She gave him a scowl and spun around to make sure no one was watching her talk to Naruto. "But that's why I came here," she said, raising his eyebrows in response to her explanation. "Everyone says that you're a monster, and they tell stories at night about the terrible things that you've done." "What?" Naruto exclaimed, his ire growing. "Why would they tell you those stories? I've never done anything wrong, except that one time I threw a tomato at the teacher, but that was once." Grinning, the girl took a seat in front of him while chuckling to herself. She excitedly clapped her hands, saying, "See, I knew that you couldn't have done all that stuff. You're only as old as me." With a sigh, Naruto reclined against the tree. Is that the reason why he was viewed as a monster by all? Because they tell stories about him at night and because the adults told them to? What makes them do that, though? Were they privy to information that he was not? He returned his focus to the girl seated before him. He assumed she would be the one to make the most fun of him out of all of them. Was she planning a practical joke on him? Faking optimism, Naruto asked, "So you're saying that you don't think I'm a monster?" He scoffed as she happily nodded. "Ha, as if, you're just a little N. Princess, girl who's treated the best. You'll believe everything they tell you." This girl scowled now, unexpectedly darkening her face. She stood in front of him, put her hands on her hips, and shot him a stern look. "Oh, so you're saying that just because I'm treated well that I'm not smart?" she exclaimed. "Well, I guess you're as stupid as everyone says you are." Naruto got upset and got to his feet now. How dare she treat him like such an idiot? Me? I'm smarter than you, and I have to teach myself? I don't have the adults kissing my feet and teaching me everything. You're a Haim who doesn't know anything and can't do anything by herself. This is probably the first time you've ever been insulted. The girl moved toward him and got very irate. This was, after all, the first time she had ever been insulted. That kind of thing would never be said to her. She shot back, addressing him directly, "Yeah, well, you're just a stupid baka." As he fell, he moved closer, placing his face right in front of hers. Exasperated, he yelled, "You can't assume that. You don't even know me." "You don't know me either, so you can't assume that I'm a stupid princess," she exclaimed, putting out her chest to appear taller. Naruto growled and gritted his teeth. The only thing his 4-year-old mind could think of was, "Well, you assumed first." The girl growled too. "No, you assumed first," she angrily exclaimed. Naruto retorted, "No, you did." "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did. You and everyone else." "No, and I'm not like everyone else." "Yeah, you are." "No, I'm not." "Yeah, you are." "No, I'm not. You don't even know me," the girl yelled, steaming her whole head in his direction. Their eyes were glaring intensely down at each other, their foreheads literally pressed together by now. When the girl's rage reached a breaking point, she stepped backward and shoved Naruto, sending him to the ground. "Huh. That's what you get," she exclaimed, grinning proudly as she turned around and cleaned her hands. "That should demonstrate." The girl's eyes widened as Naruto abruptly pushed her to the ground while dusting off his own hands and standing over her. Naruto smirked and mocked the girl on the ground, saying, "What, you thought I wasn't going to push you back? You really are in your own world?" Rather than strike back, the girl, surprisingly, raised her elegant dress to reveal a small, blood-stained knee. Naruto stared down at her in horror as his eyes grew wide with shock. She was bleeding because he had pushed her too hard. He'd wounded someone, for real. What would the adults do now that he had hurt someone, especially her, if they were punishing him for doing nothing at all? "Oh no!" Naruto exclaimed, plunging to her side to check on her safety. He was always falling, but he never bled. If he did, it was usually after a significant fall, but he would always recover in a matter of minutes. With genuine concern, he inquired, "Are you all right?" He'd never harmed anyone before, so what could he do? The girl started crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Naruto gave her a wide-eyed look, as though he had just taken a life. Panicking, Naruto thought, "Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, how could he have done that? You. Sob. Ruined. My. Sob. Dress. Sob. And you. Sob. Hurt my. Sob. Knee," she exclaimed, clutching her knee in agony. Naruto was on the verge of leaving and going into hiding for the rest of his life at this point. He was virtually out of a life if anyone found out. There, Naruto consoled her, attempting to cradle her in his arms the way he'd witnessed an adult do with a previous victim of abuse. "You're going to be all right." For a few minutes, the girl kept crying into Naruto's arms as he held her. She started to breathe heavily, but eventually the tears stopped and she was able to speak normally again. She erroneously exclaimed, "I'm going to have to go to the hospital," as she glanced up at Naruto. "I don't want to die." She was terrified because she had never experienced pain like this and hadn't seen her own blood. Naruto instantly dismissed that notion with a shake of his head. Panicking, he looked around to where he had eaten lunch and said, No, you're going to be fine." After gently setting the girl down, he quickly ran to the location where he had left his bag and returned in a few seconds with it. He placed her leg in his lap and said, "Here. I know how to fix this," he bluffed a little while closely inspecting her knee. "Or at least this is what I do when this happens to me." He spilled the contents of his bag and pulled out a refilled bottle of water, pouring half of it onto the girl's wound, causing her to gasp and grab Naruto in pain. He looked at her, clearly worried. Observing her extreme pain, he said, "Well, this is probably going to hurt a little bit. Try your best not to scream." After giving her that warning, Naruto cleaned up her small wound and applied one of his napkins to it in an effort to stem the flow of blood, however little it may be at the moment. With pained closure of her eyes, the girl grasped onto him once more, her face turning red with focus. Naruto removed the napkin after a few seconds and took a deep breath, gasping for air. Naruto noticed that the cut was no longer bleeding when he looked down at it. He turned to look at everything he had spilled on the floor and, glad he still had a band-aid, picked it up. He decided to steal a bunch of them one night for himself since the adults would never give him any. She gasped again as he peeled off the band-aid and applied it to her wound. He let out a deep sigh, patted her knee, and pulled the dress down over it once he had it secured. He said, a little nervously, "Why, you're going to be all right," as she sat up across from him. He sighed again after a minute or two of silence, praying that she wasn't still angry with him. Finally, he looked her in the eyes and said, "I'm really sorry." He almost begged for her pardon, saying, "I didn't mean to push you." "Well, I did, but I didn't think you'd get hurt." She sighed as well, blotting tears from her face and holding back a laugh at his antics. To be honest, she felt ashamed of herself for crying so much in front of him. Finally, she looked down and said, "It's okay. I pushed you too, so we're even now, okay?" she asked, casting a hopeful glance in his direction. For an instant, Naruto's eyes glowed, but before he moved, he asked her, "Are you going to tell on me for that?" The girl took a moment to consider her soiled dress, which made Naruto nervously perspire a little. His startlingly blue eyes seemed to pierce her soul as he fixed her with such fierce intensity. She had to turn away from him as she spoke, curious about her own anxiety. "No, I won't tell on you," she said. Naruto then gave a fist-pumping motion and leapt as high as he could. He yelled, jumping all around her, "Woohoo!" he exclaimed, "I'm not going to get in trouble," and danced joyfully, making the girl laugh at his antics once more. He eventually became calm and sat down in front of her once more, beneath his beloved tree. He grinned and said, "You handled the pain well." She grinned back, "For a Heim." The girl scooted in front of him, her face falling at this. She cried, "I'm not a princess." After what seemed like a brief moment of reflection, Naruto gave her a thorough look and uttered, Yeah you are." Immediately forgetting about her attractive dress or her prior injury, the girl leapt up and tackled Naruto, quickly pinning him down with her arms. "Who's a princess now?" she exclaimed, perched victoriously atop him. Naruto scoffed and attempted to brush her off, but she refused to budge. "You still are." "No I'm not, and you're still a baka." He finally asked, wondering why she was offended that he had called her a princess. "No, you're a Heim. Why do you think that's a bad thing?" The girl appeared to calm down at this point, and she cast a sorrowful glance down at Naruto. Because I'm not a princess. If I was, then I would have a family. No king or queen would give up their princess to an orphanage, she said quietly. She looked annoyed at Naruto as he scoffed once more. At the end, he replied sadly, divulging his own secrets to her. What does it matter? So many people want to adopt you. I overheard the adults say that the council or something hasn't yet voted upon what rich family gets to own you. No one will ever want to own me. Apparently not even my parents. Everyone says I'm a monster and an idiot, and I have no idea why. Though she was still depressed all the time, the girl scowled at him, realizing that he was going through a lot more than he was at the orphanage. Perhaps she ought to make friends with him. They were, after all, connected to one another in a multitude of ways. Naruto went on, people think I'm a monster and stupid, but I know I'm not. I'm normal, just like you. And people assume I'm a spoiled princess, she stated, but I'm really not. With a smile, Naruto acknowledged the girl who continued to perch on top of him. I don't really think you're a spoiled Haim anymore. You took the pain pretty well. With a smile, the girl expressed her agreement with Naruto. The girl exclaimed, and I don't really think you're an idiot anymore. You healed my wounds like a medic nin. Ding ding ding. A voice drifted in from the orphanage, just loud enough for the kids to hear. Children, it's time to come inside now. The girl stood up from Naruto and cleaned herself, and he did the same. They had to rush back to the main building because they both knew how strict the adults could be about being on time and punctual. Naruto approached his bag and started packing, with the girl's assistance. She stooped to pick up a stuffed fox and noticed how nice it felt. She asked him inquisitively, "What's this?" and pointed to the fox he was holding. After he had finished rearranging everything else in his bag, Naruto turned to face her and stood up. "Oh, him? That's Kitsune, my pet fox friend," Naruto said with a smile. He concluded, taking the beanie fox and placing it in his bag. "He's my only friend here. We've been together ever since I remember. The orphanage said some old man or something left it for me when I was born. Strange, huh?" She was struck so hard by his statement that she was unable to reply. She was aware of the experience of being without parents, as all the children in the orphanage were. But to be alone and without friends. She started thinking back to how people would constantly make fun of him and do cruel things to him, like trip him or laugh at him. He was mistreated even by the adults. She had never given it much thought before, but now that she could picture it, she realized. He gave her a curious look as she asked quietly, "What's your name?" Wondering why she would ask him that, he scratched the back of his head. Declaring with confidence, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki." He pointed his thumb confidently at his chest. "Or at least that's what they told me. And you better remember that name because I'm going to be a big and important ninja one day." She nodded, trying to force herself to find the bravery to say what she really wanted to say. She asked, staring him squarely in the eyes, "Naruto Uzumaki, do you want to be friends with me?" The blonde boy stared at her as if she had just grown wings off of her back, and his eyes widened in shock to the point where he nearly dropped his bag. "Really?" he questioned, his face displaying doubt. "Do you really mean that?" With her long dark brown hair blowing in the wind, the girl nodded. For the second time that day, Naruto leapt into the air with joy and exclaimed, "Woohoo!" He exclaimed, "Yes. My first real friend," and began to run around the girl, who was laughing at his antics. Soon after, a question that had been bothering Naruto for some time suddenly surfaced in his mind as the two hurriedly made their way back to the orphanage. He began, capturing her interest. He needed to know her name because it was his first friend's. "What's your name?" he asked. Naruto felt uneasy when the girl smiled at him. There was never a time in his memory when someone had smiled at him without making fun of him. "My name is," she said, grinning as she turned to face him, "Hinata Senju." Several weeks later, at night at Konoha's orphanage, Naruto's friendship with Hinata Senju had become somewhat of a problem. What adult, after all, would encourage the fox child Naruto to be friends with Hinata Senju, the last surviving Senju in Konoha? She was one of the most influential, if not the most, person in the village. She was the only thing that could save the Senju's strong bloodline limit since Tsunade left the village. Nevertheless, for reasons that only they knew, the two appeared to be inseparable. Together, they would play outside, eat lunch, and even sit through story time. In addition, the adults were afraid of hurting the Senju heiress or infuriating her, so they were unable to plot to harm Naruto while he was close to her. They treated her so well because they knew that if they mistreated Naruto in front of her, she would detest them and support them when she rose to the position of clan head. Everything was not going as planned. Presently, the two young friends were sitting beneath their hidden tree, some distance from the orphanage but still in its vicinity. While he rummaged through his bag for his water bottle, Naruto sat up against the tree and placed his plate of rice mush on the ground. Hinata took a seat in front of him, setting down her plate as well, and positioned Naruto's plush fox, Kitsune, next to her. For some reason, she had taken a great interest in the doll and had been taking it everywhere she went for the past few weeks. Hinata glanced at his tray and wondered why he ate such food while Naruto was searching through his bag. "Naruto," she questioned, and when he found his water bottle, he looked at her merrily. She voiced her opinions, asking, "Why don't you ever take the good food like everyone else?" Hinata raised an eyebrow in surprise at Naruto's snort of laughter. With outstretched arms, he exclaimed, "The adults won't let me take the food. So I just eat this stuff all the time. It's not really as bad as it looks, after a couple of weeks of eating it. Well, unless they make it taste really, really bad or spicy or something on some days." Furious that Naruto had to endure this treatment, Hinata shook her head. She came to the conclusion that he had simply enjoyed eating that food after all these weeks. Glancing down at her plate, Hinata picked it up and moved some of her meat and vegetables onto his plate along with some of her rice. He had to eat soggy rice that was left over from the previous meal, and she really didn't want to eat all of her delicious food in front of him. With a confident, "Here you go," she surprised him by spilling half of her plate onto his. "You can have some of mine." When he saw the delicious food land on his plate, Naruto's salivary glands began to work overtime. He stammered, "But, Hinata," turning to face her partially empty plate, "won't you be hungry?" With a smile towards Naruto, Hinata shook her head. "No, silly, I'm fine with this." After a chorus of itadakimasu, Naruto grinned and the two of them began to dig in, Naruto more quickly than his small female companion. Hinata was shocked to see how quickly Naruto devoured all of his food while she had only once brought the chopsticks up to her face. "From now on," she exclaimed, speaking the thought aloud, "you can always have my food." Naruto looked at her as though she was insane. "But you really won't have enough," he said, showing concern for her well-being. "We would only have half meals." She gave a nod, considering this. The thought struck her, "Why don't you try taking some of the good food with me tomorrow?" she exclaimed. "They usually don't treat you so bad when you're with me," and thought it was a brilliant idea. With a frown, Naruto narrowed his eyes and cast a painful glance back in his memory. Though he didn't enjoy the memories of him trying to steal the delicious food, he realized that the adults would never harm him physically or take drastic measures when he was around Hinata. This was a great idea. Hinata would always chuckle as he jumped up and down with excitement, exclaiming, "You're right. You're like my guardian angel or something. Whenever you're around me, I don't get hurt." Glad that she could assist her friend, Hinata grinned. Upon reflection, she realized that Naruto was one of her few true friends. Because of her last name, the adults had treated her well, and she was sure the children felt the same way. However, Naruto developed feelings for her on his own initiative, and he had no idea the true meaning of her last name. Well, she didn't either, but even if they did, she was positive that their friendship would endure. She asked, "Hey Naruto," a little while after finishing her own meal. Naruto turned to look at her from the tree he was currently climbing, where they used to play and hang out. He questioned, "Yeah?" Not sure what she wished to discuss. Hinata sighed as she sensed an unexplained heat rising in her cheeks. Why had she been so afraid to ask? Did she really believe he wouldn't say yes? She hoped that he would say yes, of course. "I was thinking," she said very vaguely as she turned to face the side. "Are we best friends? Would you like to be my best friend?" she asked, raising an optimistic eyebrow at him. Naruto lost his balance and toppled over the tree, shocking Hinata, who suppressed a scream as he hit her head first. "Naruto, are you okay?" she hurried to ask as she picked him up and gave him a quick examination. To be honest, Naruto had experienced far worse mishaps in the past. Because of the numerous accidents that have happened to him at the orphanage, he has already found himself awake in Konoha's hospital on multiple occasions in his brief life. He was shocked to find that even the locals were rude to him. He never had to stay there for very long, though, because he healed quickly. He detested the hospital because it terrified him so much. While it was simple to point out that Naruto had experienced far worse, he truly didn't feel any pain when he stood up and looked up into Hinata's concerned face. This person genuinely cared about him. She spent her entire life with him, watched out for him, and now expressed a desire to become best friends. Looking up at Hinata's face, which was brilliantly lit by the evening light, Naruto couldn't contain his tears. She had the unmistakable appearance of an angel, his guardian angel, in his opinion. Why yeah, I would like that. A few months later. About 6 months had passed since Naruto and Hinata first became friends, and now they were the closest of friends. Nothing the adults could do would persuade Hinata to leave Naruto or vice versa. They were that genuinely inseparable. And because Hinata was his personal guardian, Naruto was almost never hurt, just as they had planned. Under the Senju princess's watchful eye, the adults dared not touch him for fear that her wrath would eventually bring them to their knees. Right now, the two were playing with themselves and listening to the sounds of the other kids playing on the orphanage roof. It wasn't the first time Naruto had heard Hinata lament, "I am sick of this place. Naruto-kun," to him. She used to complain about it every day, in fact. "I can't believe that they still won't let you train with kunai, or even take a few scrolls." With a sigh, Naruto reclined and fixed his gaze on the heavens. He asked idly, not really caring, "So, most kids who join the academy don't know how to use kunai yet, or at least that's what they're telling us. We don't get to use the kunai until we join the academy. And why do you want the scrolls anyway? We barely know who to read them." Hinata snorted his remark, unwilling to accept it. She seated herself next to Naruto and gazed into his deep blue eyes while holding her beloved plush fox close to her chest. She still had long, dark brown hair, and her eyes were the same color. She curled her knees to her chest between kitsune as she daydreamed, her hair blowing softly in the wind. With dreamy eyes, "I can't wait for us to become ninjas together," she began. "We get to be on the same team, fighting bad guys together and stuff, and we'll be outside of the orphanage. We'll have our own apartments next to each other, because we'll be considered adults, and..." When Hinata's dream was cut short and she was brought back to reality, Naruto scowled. "That sounds fun," he said while staring at her, "but we both know that you are going to be adopted by some super rich clan, and I will be stuck in a dirty apartment." Hinata shook her head, unable to accept such a harsh destiny. She grasped his arm and tried to persuade him, saying, "No, I'm sure that you'll get adopted too. We might even get adopted by the same clan." Even at a young age, Naruto knew that wasn't possible, so he shook his head. He uttered, "They hate me, Hinata-chan," which made her eyes enlarge. "They wouldn't even want me cleaning the floors you walk on, and they definitely won't let me near you." With a sigh, Hinata lay down beside her friend and they both stared up at the sky. "Well, we can wish for that, can't we?" With a shrug, Naruto tried not to seem bothered. He would much rather have heart surgery on himself than face being parted from the one precious person in the world. He wasn't a fool at all. He understood why the world loved Hinata and detested him for different reasons. Angels and demons are incompatible as friends, which is why the two didn't get along. Naruto sadly said, holding Hinata's hand, "All we can do is enjoy the time we have now because you could be adopted any day now." Hinata tightly closed her eyes, fighting back tears as she remembered, and firmly grasped Naruto's hand once more. "Don't even say that," she cried, holding onto his arm as though he might suddenly disappear. She treasured him as much as he treasured her. In response, Naruto simply grinned and turned to face her. He laughed a little, and she laughed a little too. After all, he did have that effect on her. Attempting to appear more manly in front of her, he said, "Come on, Hinata-heim, don't be such a baby. Besides, I wouldn't even let them come and take you away. They would have to get through me first." With a silent smile, Hinata tucked her best friend into her, feeling his warmth and his words. If only they could stay together forever. She could be happy no matter where they were as long as they had each other. Later on that evening, as the council members filed into the room and took their proper seats, the Hokage sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. With their heads held high, the clan heads eagerly awaited the commencement of this meeting. The elderly Kage would acknowledge that the meeting was extremely significant, but he was not looking forward to it. The decision remained undetermined despite the fact that they had convened for the same purpose 3 times. I see everyone is accounted for, Hiruzen said, surveying the room's faces. Very well. We will begin what we have come here for. We will decide which clan shall adopt Miss Hinata's Senju until it is time for her to form her own clan. Arguments broke out in the room instantly, with almost all of the clan heads yelling their reasons for adopting the Senju child. Sometimes, Sarutobi honestly couldn't tell the difference between an academy class and his own council. He bellowed, "Silence," and silenced everyone. We will go about this like the respected ninja or leaders that we are. Now, I will first declare that Miss Hinata is a Senju, and as a village, it is our desire to raise her as a ninja in an attempt to create the mighty Senju clan once more, reviving the great will of fire which brought this village from the ground. That being said, I will only allow a prestigious ninja clan to adopt Miss Hinata. There is no debate upon this statement. Although there was some grousing from the non-ninja clan heads, most of the members nodded in agreement. I will begin this decision by first hearing out what each clan member has to say about the matter. Sume Inuzuka, I will begin with you. The Inuzuka clan's leader, Sume, got to her feet and slammed her hands on the table. Her eyes fixed on the Hokage, she said, Hinata Senju should go to our clan. The Inuzuka know how to raise others as if they were our own. We would treat her well, and she would bond with the family, and then, when she gets older, she would help your clan and give you money. Nara clan member Shikaku cut her off, giving him a severe glare. All you want, or more likely, all the majority of this council wants is to use Hinata for her resources to benefit themselves, not the village. This is more of a fight as to who gets the power of the Senju and their inheritance. It's like a bunch of kids fighting over who gets the last candy bar, he said, sighing and leaning back in idly. The Hokage cleared his throat loudly, and had to chastise him for interrupting even though he agreed with his advisor entirely. He sternly said, seeming angry, please keep your thoughts to yourself while others are speaking. With a cool shrug, Shikaku put his hands behind his head and closed his eyes to reflect. With a glare of his own, the Hokage said, Inuzuka, I have heard your main argument and I will continue with the council. Choza, Sarutobi asked the Akamichi clan head, what say you of this? Choza got to his feet, an almost disgusted expression on his face. As of now, he stated, I do not believe that a Senju should go to any large clan. All that would accomplish is making their own heads swell up with selfish motives, and while it is true that they would raise her to be their own, like Inuzuka mentioned, they would only try to completely make them of their own clan, fusing the bloodline of the Senju with theirs. Hinata Senju should either be privately trained until she can form her own clan, or given to a less prestigious clan that wouldn't let it got to their heads, like the Nara clan. Choza sat down and the Hokage gave a thoughtful nod before moving on to the next member. He was primarily trying to persuade the non-ninja members of the council who to vote for, even though he was aware that practically every clan member would cast their ballot for themselves. Hiruzen turned to the silent Aburame clan head and asked, Shibi, would you care to share your thoughts? The bug user shook his head disapprovingly, his face obscured by dark shades, and didn't even get to his feet. He started, his voice low and hazardous, would agree with Choza's statement, though it is illogical to voice my full thoughts. This meeting is not about common sense, it is merely to fill the already overflowing cups of the non-ninja council members' minds with false knowledge. We all know that Hinata will either be given to the Uchiha or the Hyuga, the largest clans who have the largest support among the members. It would be logical to skip this nonsense and let the two clans debate themselves. Hiruzen sighed again at the volume of murmuring that followed this statement. If only he had the power to choose Hinata's fate. The Hokage skipped over a few people to reach the head of the Hyuga clan and said, very well. Hiyashi, tell us why your clan should adopt Hinata, so that we can decide this matter and stop quarreling over it. With grace, Hiyashi rose, his flowing robes billowing in the slightest. His pale eyes swept over the whole council, attempting to make eye contact with every member. To a certain extent, I would concur with Shibi, Hiyashi uttered without display of emotion. With a sarcastic tone, he said, the only point of contention here is whether Hinata will join the Uchiha or my clan. On that matter, it is painfully obvious that a Senju, an enemy of the Uchiha, should not fall near the greedy hands of the Uchiha. Since the founding of Konoha, the Uchiha and the Senju have been bitter rivals. Giving up a Senju to their clan would be foolish. The Hyuga, however, befriended the Senju immediately when they allowed us to enter their village long before my birth. And to my knowledge, the clan heads before me continued to remain on social terms with the Senju up until their departure from the village. I plan to continue this ancient bond, and strengthen the Senju under the guidance of excellent ninja. We would train her to become the powerful heiress that she needs to be in order to establish the Senju clan once more. Under the all-seeing eyes of the Hyuga, we would rekindle the will of fire that has been scattered years ago. The majority of the council nodded in agreement as Hiyashi sat back down, his smug expression on display, and some non-ninja members gave a small applause for the speech. The cunning Hiyashi almost had the Hokage nodding in agreement. The Hyuga had the upper hand in this argument, unless the Uchiha clan had some other compelling reason to adopt Hinata. Fugaku? Hiruzen asked, holding up his hand to wait for the man to speak. Following an extended period of quiet, Fugaku, the esteemed head of the Uchiha clan, rose to his feet and fixed the Hokage with a fierce gaze. I concur with Hiyashi. Hinata Senju's possession ought to belong to the Hyuga clan, he stated with a grave expression on his face. After days of strategic debate, most of the council gasped at Fugaku's abrupt surrender. The statement shocked Hiyashi and Shibi as well, as they realized how easily the Uchiha had given up. Are you sure you want to give Hinata to the Hyuga clan? The Hokage questioned, his thoughts racing to determine Fugaku's motivation. The Uchiha gave a curious nod of satisfaction at this choice. Yes, I am quite sure. Sarutobi gave the council a perplexed shake of his head but said, very well. Does the council agree with this decision? The Hokage could tell that most of the group was in agreement because they were nodding their heads. It was just paperwork from here on out. Then as of now, Hiruzen stated in a firm voice, Hinata Senju will be formally adopted by the Hyuga clan until it is time for her to form her own clan. The following morning, walking drowsily to the cafeteria, his messy hair still unkempt from the previous night's sleep, Naruto yawned. Pupils crowded into the spacious room beside him, not even glaring at him. They knew not to make fun of him after all the time he'd spent with Hinata, or else the Senju herself would eat them alive. Reaching for a tray, he took a seat at his own table in the darkened far back of the room. He resisted leaving and held onto his food until, as he was considering it, Hinata Senju entered the cafeteria with a group of other girls her age, looking exhausted and holding onto Kitsune, her cherished plush foxy doll. Her eyes lit up as soon as she recognized him, and she hurried to his table, leaving her former friends behind. Good morning, Naruto-kun, she said as she sat down beside him and placed Kitsune down beside her. Observing his empty tray, she asked, did you eat already? When he explained why, Naruto looked away with a smile on his face and a shrug. He was honest when he said, no, I decided to wait for you to come first. Hinata gave him a smile, and her cheeks began to flush a little. She truly had Naruto as her best friend, and he never stopped thinking about her. Together, the two went grocery shopping and returned to settle down to eat. After they were done, they put their trays away and planned their next course of action. After they had finished their meals, he playfully asked Hinata-chan, so, what do you want to do next, Hinata-chan? On this Saturday, the children at the orphanage were essentially free to do as they pleased, with the obvious exception of leaving the grounds. It was a long time for these kids to wait until they were 8 years old to be able to do that. She shrugged, considering carefully how they could spend the day together. I don't know, she said. She enthusiastically cast her vote, loving adventure almost as much as her blonde friend. How about we climb up to the roof and think about it then? She asked. Before she could finish speaking, Naruto was grasping her hand and pulling her outside, so she didn't even need to ask. The two ran out, and they ascended a low tree that was close to the main building when no one else was around. Naruto eventually came up with the idea that they could jump from the tree to the roof because its branches dangled over the building. Naruto had discovered some time ago that they could climb up the tree thanks to its thick, low, and numerous branches. Hinata needed some time to be persuaded, but in the end, she was able to do it after he assured her that he would catch her if she fell. Since climbing to the roof was probably the most daring thing they could do together, they did it whenever they could. After climbing to the top of the roof, they made their way to the side they preferred, which allowed them to see part of the village outside the compound's walls. Naruto remarked, This view never gets old, as he sat down next to Hinata. The Senju gave him a nod of agreement. Her eyes glazed over dreamily. She said, "Yeah. I can't wait for the day when we get to go outside of here together. We'll go to the academy, and play at the nearby parks, and explore the village together and find hidden places, and..." It hurt Naruto to know that the only thing standing between them and achieving all those things with Hinata was 4 more years and a big brick wall. However, what if Hinata had been adopted earlier? He truly wanted to spend as much time as possible with her while they had it, because they would never get to experience that together. His eyes suddenly widened as a remarkable thought occurred to him. He gave Hinata a gentle prod in the side while she was still talking, waking her up from her reverie to stare at him inquisitively. "Anyo?" she inquired, pondering the reason behind his wide eyes. With his eyes fixed on the spot, Naruto simply gestured to the side. His finger led Hinata's eyes, and she was disappointed to see only a tree that resembled the one they had climbed up. She said, "What is it, Naruto-kun?" Now that she was truly interested in what he was doing. "It's just a tree." Realizing she wasn't getting what he was really getting at, Naruto shook his head. "But look where it leads to." Hinata turned to face the tree and traced her gaze along the dense branches that reached beyond the substantial brick wall. She could hardly make out the outline of a house that was partially visible beyond the wall. He could not possibly be considering. He shouted to her, trying not to show off the excitement coursing through his daring body, "It's our way out. We could walk across the tree branch, and jump onto the roof on the other side of the wall." Hinata's eyes grew wide as well, following his train of thought. She muttered, almost as if someone would hear her, "But Naruto, it's against the rules." It was well known among all the residents of the orphanage that children younger than 8 were not allowed to leave the premises. A gate was located at the entrance, and an adult was always on duty to ensure that no kids escaped. With a low, covert voice, Naruto countered, leaning in close to Hinata, saying, "We won't get caught. We can explore the village together and be back before anybody knows we're gone." Hinata pushed her fingers together in a nervous habit she had just started, looking back and forth between the outside village and the tree branch. She trembled and said, "I don't know, Naruto-kun," not knowing what to do. A part of her wanted to go on the adventure with her best friend, but she also didn't want to take the chance of getting into trouble. We could really get in big trouble. To be quite honest, her concerns about Naruto were far more than her concerns about herself. Although she was aware that they would only chastise her for leaving the compound, she couldn't even begin to imagine what they would do to Naruto if they discovered he had departed. Grinning broadly, Naruto took hold of her hands and met her gaze directly. He spoke to her up close, making her little cheeks turn a lovely pale pink. "Trust me, Hina-chan," he said. "You won't get in trouble. It's Saturday, and they don't check on us until dinner time." With a sideways glance, Hinata averted her penetrating blue eyes. She told him, "I know I won't get in trouble. I'm worried about you getting in trouble." Naruto nearly forgot about his earlier plans when he realized how much compassion he was receiving from her words and voice. No matter how much time he spent with Hinata, her expressions of concern for him always made him feel very special. He grinned even more at her and said, "Don't worry about me. I'll be just fine as long as we're together. Believe it, you're my guardian angel, after all." With a sigh, Hinata realized she had no idea what to do. Is it worth jeopardizing Naruto's security for the sake of amusement alone? Seeing the conflict in her eyes, Naruto used his final argument to persuade her. "Remember, Hinata, we don't know how much time we have left together, so we need to enjoy whatever we already have." At this, Hinata bravely nodded and got to her feet beside Naruto, prepared to follow him. "Are you with me, Hinata-chan?" excitedly questioned Naruto as he got up too. "Hi," she exclaimed, practically giving him a salute. As is his custom, Naruto leapt into the air and gave a silent cheer that always made Hinata laugh. "Then let's do it, together." The two friends teetered nervously across the thick branch and over the gate at the end. Fortunately, the numerous leaves that blossomed from the tree obscured them from view. When they saw that the house below them only had a 3-foot drop from its roof, they were equally astounded. When Naruto descended to the roof first, Hinata followed suit and boldly landed next to him. They were both breathing heavily, giddy with excitement at what they were actually accomplishing. Silently, Naruto said, "We're out of there," as he turned to face the orphanage and could see the top of the roof. He exclaimed, Woohoo! And took Hinata's hand, guiding her to the edge of the roof. Again, to their luck, the fall to the ground was short because of a dumpster that was only a few feet from the roof. Together, they leapt down to it, and then they leapt to the ground. Raising their heads, they both cast wide-eyed glances at the alley ahead that led to the open village. A whole village with its secrets, tunnels, open spaces, trees, stores, other people, and much more lay before them. They were in a hurry. Let's go. Aim, Yahiko, kill me. The 15-year-old Yahiko looked up at his best friend Nagato, who was staring at him gravely, panting heavily through the heavy falling rain. Yahiko glanced from his red-haired friend to their other friend who was being held captive by their enemy, his hands trembling wildly as he clutched a kunai. Don't do it. Yahiko's head snapped back forward to find Konan on her knees, atop the hill ahead of them, gripped firmly by Hanzo, the AIM leader who had betrayed them. Don't worry about me, you two get out of here. Yahiko was filled with uncertainty as he realized that he was suddenly responsible for his two friends' fates. Hanzo tricked them at a rendezvous, believing that he and his gang posed a threat. With the aid of Danzo's route, he and his gang were now encircled and had little chance of getting away. Yahiko's best friend and the gang's leader, Nagato, had to be killed if he was to keep his followers alive. He was startled out of his thoughts as Nagato yelled, "Yahiko!" at him. Do it. Captive on top of the hill, Konan retaliated, "No, don't do it." With an evil expression on his face, Hanzo commanded, "You'd better hurry up, unless you want the girl to die," from his position of authority. Panting heavily, Yahiko could not decide whose life he would have to give up. There was no option. How was he able to accomplish it? Nagato suddenly charged at him, fierce expression on his face. Yahiko could see what Nagato was going to do with his unique eyes. But his friend moved too quickly. Nagato suddenly materialized in front of him, snatching his arm and driving it forward into his abdomen, compelling Yahiko to murder him. Yahiko's eyes widened as he felt his best friend's hand, which was holding the kunai, slam into a vital spot, killing him for sure. His eyes began to well up with tears as he felt his friend's labored breathing on his neck. "You and Konan," Nagato said to him calmly and quietly, "you've got to stay alive somehow. You are the Messiah. I know you are. With your eyes, you can really change this world. You can, really." At that moment, Nagato's body went limp, and he collapsed to the ground, his mouth dripping with blood. From the hill, Konan cried out, "Nagato!" her eyes revealing to her what she had hoped to avoid seeing. The same tears that had given him and his friends hope to free this world from the war that inhabited it began to trickle out of Yahiko's spiral eyes. It was Nagato, not him, who deserved these eyes. Why? Why was this necessary to occur? His only concern was keeping his friends safe. "I will take on the role of this world's god if the war goes on." Tears, which now reflected only anger, continued to fall from his eyes, echoing the words of his friend. As hundreds of kunais started to fall on them from the hill, Hanzo gave the order to have both Root and his men execute the entire gang. "I'm going to become God." Just as they were about to reach him, Yahiko raised his hand, launching a tremendous force wave that easily repelled every kunai in all directions. "He repelled them!" Hanzo exclaimed, shocked to see something of that sort carried out in such a way. "How?" Hanzo ran out of words as Nagato materialized in front of him, stooping to grab Konan as Hanzo leapt to his back. However, before he could take further action, explosive tags shot out from beneath him and rapidly wrapped around their bodies as they started to flare. Whack! A massive explosion erupted, filling the air with fire and destroying everything in its path, including many members of Yahiko's gang and even some of his own men who were unable to flee. Hanzo squinted his eyes, trying to determine if they had been killed by the blast or not. He wondered, "Did I get them?" as he waited for the smoke to subside. When the ash cloud finally lifted, it showed Konan and Yahiko, who were standing behind from the spot but otherwise safe. Konan saw that her friend was hurt and yelled up, "Yahiko!" to thank him for saving her. Yahiko gave the whining Konan an order to stay here and protect Nagato's body, and the boy gave a weak nod. After that, he approached Hanzo slowly while glaring at him with such intense hatred that the strong leader of the village hidden in rain became agitated. Considering his opponent was still alive, Hanzo said, "Not bad, kid. I'm surprised you managed to escape my exploding attack. Those eyes of yours, the Rinnegan, they truly live up to what the legends tell of them." He pointed at Conan, Yahiko, and the other members of their gang as he threw down his hand, looking back at all of the root members and his own forces. "Kill them all." Konoha, Twilight. Fortunately, Naruto remembered the location of the alley they had previously left, so he held Hinata's hand as they returned there. Going about Konoha and exploring the large village together, they had spent the entire day doing as much as a 4.5-year-old couple could. They strolled around, experiencing the excitement of exploration thanks to their imagination. Naruto's trip to the "What's the word?" was one of his favorite moments of the day. A bar of ramen. Due to their hunger, the two 4-year-olds followed Naruto's nose and found a ramen bar. Whoever owned the bar felt bad for the two and gave them 2 complimentary bowls. Hinata's favorite memory of the day is their joint ascent to the village's highest point. It resembled a mountain that had faces engraved on it. Naruto discovered a set of stairs at the base, and after spending 30 minutes climbing, they were rewarded with a view of the entire village. The entire village right in front of them. When Naruto and Hinata saw the breathtaking scene in front of them, they were both speechless. They could see the vast fields and forest that surrounded the enormous walls of everything, as well as the orphanage, a sizable structure in the middle of the village. They had then continued to stroll around and take in the openness of everything. But as the sun started to set, they walked back to the orphanage together, holding hands the entire time to ensure they wouldn't get lost in the throng. "There's the dumpster," Naruto exclaimed, pointing with his finger at the dumpster that they had used to descend. They knew they were in the right place because the wall that blocked the orphanage was at the end of the alley. Naruto pulled himself over first, then helped Hinata, who was still clinging to her fox doll, as they climbed up the dumpster together, supporting one another along the way. After exerting himself, Naruto leapt up against the wall and his hands reached the top, enabling him to pull himself over. Then he leaned over the wall and extended his hand to Hinata, who took it and used his assistance to pull herself over. After reaching the roof, they were able to ascend onto the branch by employing the wall as support and utilizing their same technique. From that point on, they crossed the branch, went over the wall, and eventually arrived on the academy's roof just in time to hear dinner. Everybody back for dinner. When Naruto and Hinata realized they had returned safely and without being detected, they both let out a deep breath. When they were able to breathe normally again, they looked up at each other and laughed excitedly at what they had just accomplished. All they could think about that evening was the happiness they had shared, which would live on in their memories forever, collectively. The following morning Naruto dreamed of all the adventures he and Hinata would go on every weekend, and he woke up smiling. Excited to meet Hinata for breakfast and catch up on their day, he practically leapt out of bed, hurriedly threw his clothes on, and jogged to the cafeteria. It was Sunday, after all, and as laid back as Saturday, so maybe they could get away again. He was in the hallway when he heard voices, so he stopped his merry skipping and walked slowly to investigate. A group of girls in his age group were gathered together, discussing something significant. One of them said in a whisper that was just loud enough for Naruto to overhear, "So did you hear? Yeah, I can't believe she's finally adopted." Naruto's blood ran cold at this point, and he tried everything in his power to stop himself from acting foolishly. Before drawing any conclusions, such as the ones he was currently thinking, he needed to hear more information. "I know, right? I guess that means that he'll be all alone again." Naruto's heart stopped at that moment, and he bolted down the hallway as quickly as his short legs would allow. There was just no way at all. Everyone in the cafeteria stopped what they were doing to stare at him as he ran into it, but he didn't give a damn. His gaze darted across all the shocked or angry faces, searching for the one compassionate face he had grown to love and needed to see. However, she was absent. He turned around and ran through the orphanage's hallways once more, completely disregarding the adults yelling at him. It was against the rules for him to run all the way down to the dormitories for the excluded girls, but he did. He ignored the sporadic screams of girls and headed to Hinata's room, which he knew existed, to have a look inside. Only to discover a folded bedsheet and an empty bed. To make matters worse, he noticed Hinata's beloved toy, Kitsune, positioned atop the pillow, which further alarmed Naruto's racing thoughts. Since Hinata would never leave her cuddly fox doll at home, this could only imply. Without further ado, Naruto grabbed the fox doll and ran all the way to the orphanage's front doors, trying to hold back the tears that were now streaming down his cheeks. When he arrived at the front, he noticed a number of grown-up faces clad in long white silk robes that he had never seen before. Naruto had seen the orphanage head several times, and they were all gathered around the hallway, conversing. He leaned against the wall and listened in on the conversation while being careful not to get caught. With hope still intact, Naruto heard, "Do you have the papers?" Indeed. Following some scuffling of documents, Naruto strained to hear more, demanding to know the identity of the adoptee. There was silence for a while until Naruto heard some footsteps, which were followed by, "Are you ready? Hi." Naruto's blood froze at this final word, instantly recognizing the familiarity. He leapt out into the hallway, forgetting all previous cunning, to find out who was actually being adopted. When he saw the one person he never wanted to associate the term adopted with, his body froze again. His eyes met Hinata Senju's in that instant, as she looked back over her shoulder in terror and tears in her eyes while holding hands with a man dressed in white robes. "Hinata. No," he exclaimed, his eyes welling up with tears as he realized that his worst fears were coming true. As the adults turned to observe the disturbance, their expressions changed to ones of disgust upon realizing who it could be. "What is he doing here?" Hiyashi spit out, glaring angrily at Naruto while gripping Hinata's hand. Hoping not to blow the deal, the head of the orphanage glanced nervously at Hiyashi and angrily at Naruto. "Well, the Hokage forced us to take him, but we were planning on." "I don't care." Hiyashi waved his hand icily to break up the conversation. "Get that monstrosity out of my sight. Today is a monumental day for my clan and I don't want it to be ruined by this abomination." Hiyashi started leading Hinata out the door while she tried her hardest to turn around and give Naruto a beseeching look. Approaching Naruto, the head of the orphanage firmly took hold of his arm and dragged him away. He swore angrily to Naruto, "You have been a thorn in my side for long enough, you fox. Well, that ends today. I am personally going to make sure that your stay here is going to be hell, until I can legally kick you out of here, which I will make sure I literally do." Naruto was not even paying attention, focusing only on the image of a sobbing Hinata retreating from view. Without considering the repercussions, Naruto acted quickly and bit the adult holding him in the arm. Naruto was able to swiftly run to the group of people who were retreating and push through until he reached Hinata as the man screamed and released Naruto. Hinata's eyes widened for a moment, and Naruto pressed close to her, giving her a panting hug. He whispered to her, "I won't forget you," as he heard the adults scream. He then gave her his fox doll and slipped it into her hands. Tears spilled from Hinata's eyes onto Naruto's shoulder, and she sobbed even harder. "I won't forget you either, Naruto-kun." After that, two adults dragged Naruto away from Hinata and physically separated him from her. Hinata's tiny smile and teary eyes were the last things he saw of her, and he could only smile back. "I will always remember you." Later on that day, the head of the orphanage literally threw Naruto into his room, where he rolled until he violently struck a wall. The man was furious and yelled at him, "Pack what little you have, scum. Because you are leaving, today, I don't care what the Hokage told me anymore. You will never set foot in this orphanage again. I'll be back in 5 minutes." Wiping away his tears, Naruto sighed sadly as the door shut behind him. He grabbed the bag he was carrying and packed everything he owned into it. Though it had only been 4.5 years, this was easily the worst day of his life. Even though the day had just begun, he could honestly say that it had already been more painful than every day he had spent in these fearsome walls prior to meeting Hinata. Though it was not how he had intended it to happen, he and Hinata were both leaving the orphanage. He would have been overjoyed if Hinata and he had been adopted together. Heck, he would have been thrilled even if they had been expelled together. But now that he was apart from her, he was unsure of what would happen to him. Even though his bag was nearly full, he quickly packed everything he owned into it. Using the final moments he had left in the orphanage to cherish the time he spent there with Hinata, he tucked his pillow under his arm and sat on his bed. Even though he had only been with her for 6 months, it had been the most wonderful time of his life. A few minutes later, the man reappeared in the space, hard grabbing Naruto by the arm and pulling him out. He quickly led Naruto to the magnificent orphanage entrance, where Naruto had just moments before seen Hinata. Along with Naruto, He exited the building and strolled outside, approaching the orphanage's gates. As soon as they arrived at the orphanage, the man quickly opened the gates, giving Naruto a view of Konoha from the front that he had never seen before. However, he then picked him up by the back of his shirt, threw him outside, and made him roll painfully on the filthy street. He yelled, "Good riddance," and spat on the floor. The orphanage's gates then started to close, but just before they did, Naruto glanced up in time to see a ghost. A memory of Hinata, wavering on the roof of the facility alongside him. Then, the gates closed completely, cutting off his access to the outside world.
So this was it for today. I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.